Mr. Speaker, members of this House. For years, we have discussed the Equal Rights Amendment. Some years we've had hearings, others we have not. I know that this piece of legislation has had a majority of women in this chamber either carried it or co-patroned it, myself included. This year, we have a record number of women in this historic House as we honor 400 years of the legislature. And this year, we have heard from many in this chamber about the ERA. We heard from Delegate Carol Foy of Prince William County, who talked about her days at VMI. It is the hard truth that our Commonwealth defended its discriminatory practice of barring women from this prestigious institution of higher learning. It is the 14th Amendment that was the saving grace to the situation. But the discrimination among the sexes is not held to the highest standard when reviewed by the court. It is only subject to intermediate scrutiny. That does not feel like equality. We heard from Delegate Jones of Norfolk, who talked about the need for the Equal Rights Amendment as he witnessed his mother, who is now a Virginia judge, earn less than her male counterparts, and she prosecuted some of the most violent crimes in the state. Mr. Speaker, we heard from Delegate Price of Newport News, who brought to light the side of the suffragist movement, which many don't talk about, the blatant racism that existed by some of its leaders. White women got the right to vote. Their African-American sisters still had a far way to go in many ways to exercise that right because of Jim Crow laws. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the intersectionality of race and gender, the African-American woman and women of color are most often left behind. She makes 63 cents to every dollar a white man makes. In giving birth, black women have a higher rate of mortality compared to white women. African-American women are 3 times more likely to die from complications associated with childbirth. And most certainly, she's often the last to enter the seats of political power. Consider the history of our own Commonwealth. November 6, 1923, the first women elected to the General Assembly were Sarah Lee Fain of Norfolk and Helen Timmons Henderson of Buchanan County. They were white. It was 60 years later that the first African-American woman elected to the Assembly, the late Senator Yvonne Miller, was elected to this chamber in 1983. We are celebrating 400 years of this legislature, but take note, it took 364 years since our beginning for a black woman to arrive in the chambers. I know many are wondering, what does the intersectionality of race and gender have to do with what we are about to face this week? Why does it matter when we talk about the ERA? I say, Mr. Speaker, it has everything to do with it. I realize that there are some in the chamber that say race doesn't matter. Indeed, I have heard those words this very session. Others say the ERA is not necessary. And I agree, in a perfect world with a perfect history, it shouldn't matter. But we aren't in that perfect world. If anything, past mistakes of our leaders have only recently shed light that we are dealing with the same issues of race, equality, and equity to this day. Mr. Speaker, I will tell you in some ways things have gotten better. As a child, my family experienced a cross burning through our car, put through its windshield. That night I remember reds and oranges illuminating on the window, and I remember my mom trying to not allow me to see that cross burning in the car. I worry less today that it may be commonplace for my nieces and nephew to witness, but there's still a concern in my heart that maybe one day they will. From what we could find in our history, I was the first African-American woman from Northern Virginia elected to this assembly. Now today, I'm honored to see so many women of color in Northern Virginia join me as we represent our constituents and show young girls like my nieces that it doesn't matter who you are and what you like. It is you who is important, and that is you that can make our government diverse. Mr. Speaker, for me, this is a straightforward proposition. Some of us are further along the road in equality and equitable position under the law. I have to believe in my heart that we are still marching in that direction with the best of intentions. However, I want my nieces to grow up in a world where Virginia has said that the basic equality for the sexes is important enough that we put it in plain language in the most important document our country has to offer. All I ask is that my colleagues give us a vote on the floor on this House. I think that our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, and nieces deserve our full consideration of this issue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.